As everybody knows, I've been working on the area called Layman Van Acres, Mulder area for some years. And I asked Jack Bear to get together and see if he could get some kind of thing together so that we could take a look and try to get an idea of just what actually has happened to the people in that neighborhood. And it's a myriad of things that has happened in the past that's gotten us into the situation, and we're trying to see if we can figure a way to get out of it. So, Jack, if you would go ahead and give us a rundown where you are.
Sure. As Council mentioned, he's asked me to put together a presentation on a few items, and it really provides kind of a context of what Mr. Mulder may discuss in terms of specifically what the airport's doing with regard to mitigation, buyout issues, and the FAA. But this is a more general context of kind of a profile of the neighborhoods and also some industrial land use issues. So just to begin, again, primarily just an overview of the neighborhoods in terms of their geographical context. There's been a lot of discussion about these neighborhoods being relatively isolated by other geographical features and uses, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Some photos of the area, issues affecting residential property values, including the age of housing, zoning, the regulatory floodplain, and the noise contours. Again, I'll just identify those, and Mr. Mulder may follow up. Recent home sales. I looked at some recent home sales to get kind of a ballpark sense of what home values are in the area. And there's some concern expressed that there's a growing pattern of institutional ownership of residential lots, so I looked at some of the ownership patterns to kind of see what those trends are. And then in a separate, kind of a related issue, I looked at some industrial land needs and opportunities, with the thought being that in the long term, at least the neighbors have expressed this, that this might be a more appropriate space for industrial uses. So just to begin, I'd like to start with just kind of an overview in terms of the geographical context of the area, to kind of give you your bearings. Bear with me for a second while this loads.
Which way's north?
You're the navigator. This is a global perspective. Right.
Impressive guy.
As you can see, this large block to the north, or what we'll refer to as the Layman Acres subdivision and the Van Acres subdivision, in shorthand referred to it as the Layman Acres or Layman Van Acres. This area stripped to the south is really primarily the Moses subdivision. So these are the primary residential areas, along with a really large trailer park southeast. But just to kind of get a sense, there's a city park, a school site, elementary school site in the middle of the area, and there's the Spartan School of Aeronautics and their dormitories there. But to get a sense of the relationship to the airport, if you just kind of change the angle here, you can see that there's the airport and the runway is there. So that's just kind of the context for the area. And starting with that view of the area, I wanted to identify some of the features, geographical features, and other land uses that kind of contribute to the sense of this as being kind of an island of residential, a neighborhood within these different uses. First, of course, the airport itself and flight path from runways. And this is largely an agriculturally zoned area, I believe is owned by the airport. It's left vacant currently, but I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And of course, there's the expressway system. This is Highway 11, this being 244, and this 169 sort of cradled the neighborhoods here. And these were largely developed after the neighborhood was. The neighborhood dates back to the 50s generally speaking, and earlier the expressway system was planned and developed subsequent to the 1950s. Planned in the 50s and developed subsequently. This is, just to kind of get your bearings, this is Pine Street, and this being Mingo. Everything north of Pine essentially is industrial zone property. All of this is zone industrial, and even all this was not currently used for industrial purposes. And everything along Mingo, everything to the east is largely industrial, and this is a heavy commercial swath adjacent to the neighborhood. And another potentially isolating feature, natural feature, of course, is Mingo Creek, and all of the issues associated with that. So you can see when the neighbors and Councilor refers to the area as being relatively isolated, those are some of the features that kind of contribute to that isolation. Did a quick tour of the area and laid out some photos. To start with, this is just kind of a typical street scene in this area. You can see relatively modest, around 1,200 square foot homes, single story. And they were all developed, at least in this large swath, around the same time, so they're very similar in terms of their construction. And then just starting at the edge and working my way around the neighborhood, this is from this area looking north and west. That's these commercial areas here. That's kind of that geodesic dome building on Mingo. You can see some commercial uses alongside it. This is from the trailer park, Village Trailer Park, looking north. There's a park, as I said, in the middle of the neighborhood. It's a loving park. And of course, as with most other parks across the city, it has a lot of deferred maintenance issues. So while we typically think of parks as being kind of stabilizing influences in neighborhoods, I'm not real sure that applies here. There's the neighborhood pool that's been closed, for example. And of course, it has the mowing issues that most parks and right-of-ways are experiencing right now, which we discussed earlier. Another area that probably was a stabilizing influence at one time is the John Ross Elementary School site, as seen here. Best information I was able to find that it was closed as an elementary school in 1984. It's still used for other purposes sporadically, but I don't believe it's still used as an elementary school. And this is looking toward the interior of the neighborhood again, just to kind of get a sense of what that looks like. And this 89th East Avenue, we'll just kind of go up there. This is looking due west at airport property that's zoned agricultural and vacant currently. This is looking up 89th East Avenue to the north. This is the vacant property, and this is the neighborhood across 89th East Avenue. This is looking toward the interior of the neighborhood, just about Latimer Place or so. These are the new Spartan dormitories that have been discussed in this committee a few times on 89th East Avenue. This is looking north and west. And this is looking back toward the south. Those are the Spartan dormitories in the neighborhood adjacent there on 89th. This is from the corner of 89th and Pine. Looking toward the airport, there's some of the industrial uses that you can see there. Moving toward the east and looking back to the interior of the neighborhood again. And then approaching Mingo, these are some of the commercial uses on the corner of Pine and Mingo, looking due east. And then finally, this is a shot of the Mingo Creek area, which is, with all the work that's been done, as wide as a river here. This is from approximately this area looking northwest. So that's just kind of a broad overview, just to get your bearings. But I also looked at some issues affecting residential property values, as I mentioned. For example, housing age. I started with this map. It's really a fascinating map from INCOG that we developed in 2005. It shows residential development in the city by age, by the year built. So you can see kind of the waves of residential development throughout the city. And as we kind of zoom in to the Layman Acres, Moses area, you can see that by and large, these these developments were built in the 1950s. Some of the areas, Moses subdivision, were developed even earlier than that, but by and large, in the 1950s. I looked at zoning, which also is a significant factor in terms of property values. Largely in this area, obviously, zone single-family residential has a lot of heavy commercial uses adjacent to the neighborhood to the east, industrial uses in gray areas further east and then to the north. These are the areas that are currently vacant, but currently agriculturally zoned. You can see a large swath of commercial development as you get toward Admiral across 244. And this is the trailer park zone, RMH zone. The airport is just north. It's off the map here. I looked at the regulatory floodplain. Obviously, this is the Mingo Creek floodplain boundary, which impacts everything south of Latimer, primarily the Moses area and the trailer park here. In this area, the solid line represents a FEMA A-zone designation, and I'm not sure specifically what the implications of that are, except that it's a relatively higher risk of flooding and has some insurance ramifications as well, but that's where the floodplain boundary falls. Noise contours, again, just to identify those, and Mr. Mulder will probably talk quite a bit more about this, but essentially if this is the neighborhood here, the noise contour of 65 decibels day-night average, which is kind of a threshold, an important threshold for the FAA, really kind of bisects the neighborhood through here. And then looked at recent sales in the area to kind of get a sense of what property values are. And I looked at Zillow.com, which is just kind of a website that identifies land sales in the area. You can see that these red dots represent recent sales in recent months of residential property. And here are some of the details on that. You can see the sale prices range from $26,000 for a 1,500 square foot property on Latimer Place, which is obviously kind of an outlier here on the low end, up to $90,000 sale price for a 1,600 square foot home. But if you take the average, it comes out to about $63,000 for a 1,200 square foot home based on these sales. And then getting back to the issue of institutional ownership, which is a concern that's been expressed, I looked at ownership records of all the properties in the area to identify institutional owners, meaning owners other than individuals or single families. Nearly 7.5% of the residential lots in the area are owned by family trusts, which I may or may not consider those really institutional owners. Really have more to do with the fact that the neighborhood dates back to the 50s and probably changed hands generationally a few times. About 2.6% of the lots are owned by corporations and LLCs, including real estate investment companies and that sort of thing. And then 0.9, nearly 1% are owned by government nonprofit entities. Everything from the Housing Authority, HUD, Habitat for Humanity, that sort of thing. So if we look at what you might think of as really as institutional ownership, it amounts to about 3.5% of the 541 or so residential lots. Whether that's a problem or could become a problem over time, probably subject to some study.
Jack, can I just go back to that noise contour there? Well, see, this is one thing we've been quite concerned with, is the fact that that the 65 decibel it takes in almost 2/3 of that area. We thought for a while that it didn't take in that much, but it actually takes in over 2/3 of that area. So that's why we've been continuing that. Basically, those people need to be out of there simply because of the fact that most of that area is under 65 decibel. But notwithstanding the noise mitigation period now, the fact that that area is completely surrounded by industrial and highways, and they're just completely isolated from any neighborhood. And that's the thing that's really been concerning me. Yes, Jack, go ahead.
And again, Mr. Mulder may speak
Yeah, I'm sure
a little bit more
we'll get
detail. And a related issue, the councilor had asked me to look at some industrial development, land needs and opportunities in the city, again with an eye toward possibly over the long term, this property perhaps converting to a different use. So to begin with, I looked at some of the recently announced large industrial development deals that have gotten a lot of press lately, just to see how much land they've acquired. The Google facility in Pryor is about an 800-acre facility, so quite large. And if you relate that back to Layman Acres, you're probably looking at about 300 acres just in terms of the residential component of residential lots, and possibly even including the trailer park facility there. Some concept. And the Gatorade facility also in Pryor is taking up about 165 acres. And that was announced last summer. The Walmart distribution center in Bartlesville is a large facility, about 150 acres. And the Dell facility in Oklahoma City, which got a lot of press in fall of 04, is on about a 60-acre site. And that's obviously, if you're familiar with the area, it's a little closer to kind of the downtown, midtown area than you might think of in terms of an industrial or call center, even a call center type facility. So to get a sense of kind of what's available in terms of industrial land, this is from the Department of Commerce's Industrial Park Directory. It's a little outdated, but you can see for the city of Tulsa, and this is looking specifically at the city as distinct from the region, there are 4 sites listed ranging from 1,300 acres in the Cherokee Industrial Park to about 60 acres. And obviously that doesn't include other greenfield sites that are marketed that may have industrial zoning, such as this one. This is property that's just north and east of the Layman Acres area on Apache and 129th East Avenue, which is about 140 acres, marketed for $4.2 million. And it doesn't include as well probably the largest swath of largely undeveloped land in the city limits, which is the Fair Oaks area and District 6, which comprises really the eastern half of District 6. It's about 13 square miles. But another relatively large swath of industrial property that could be used for industrial purposes is the airport's Aerospace Industrial Park, which is being proposed and planned in April of 06. The committee of the Improvement Trust selected a company as a master developer for Aerospace Industrial Park, which would be constructed on about 880 acres of vacant land at the airport. And you can see, if this comes to fruition over the long term, if market demand is going to allow for a full development of this much property, it probably would contribute even further to the relative isolation of this, with that greenfield site to the west could potentially be developed for industrial purposes, further contributing to the relative isolation of these neighborhoods. So that's kind of, just in broad terms, kind of the context of the neighborhoods, and I think Mr. Mulder may have some more in terms of the airport and the FAA or other from there?
Yeah, the thing I'd like to thank Jack for putting this together for us. It's something that I've been needing to trying to get done, and he chose to give me a hand and get this thing drawn up so everybody can take a good look and see what actually the problems are. Mr. Mulder, if you would.
Sure.
Before we do that, it's 11:30 and the budget committee is supposed to start at 11:30. How long do you think this is going to take so we can give everybody the heads up on when the budget deal is going to start?
Got about 10 slides.
Who's that?
I can go
You
through.
need over here?
No, I'm fine here.
Okay.
You can
One
run
other item on the agenda, you think we can get budget kicked off at 11:45?
That'd be good.
Okay, let's shoot for that.
Okay.
Thanks.
I do have a report that I'm passing around that goes with this.
Thank you.
I'm Jeff Mulder, the airport director, and the purpose of the report is in responding to the City Council consensus, which direction was to develop a plan to seek funding to acquire the homes in Layman Van Acres and those neighborhoods. What is up on the screen looks familiar to what we just saw, which is the airport area, the noise contours that you see in color. That's established our existing program boundaries, and the Layman Van Acres and Moses neighborhoods. Just to quickly review, the FAA provides funds to airports that conduct noise studies and establishes noise mitigation programs. Our current program is eligible for about 1,700 homes, about 1,700 homes, and it involves some limited home acquisition, and then sound insulation, easement purchase from the homeowners, or sales assistance payment to the homeowners. Those are the primary options. The Layman Van Acres neighborhoods and Moses neighborhoods consist of about 550 homes approximately. About 469 of those are eligible for the existing program. About 160 in that area have participated in the program that we have. Next slide, please. This just shows the kind of a flow chart of the analysis that was undertaken, and obviously it shows the home acquisition, what the steps would be, which would include updating the existing program, a short discussion on whether it would be voluntary or mandatory acquisition, FAA funding scenarios, timelines, issues, and so forth. In discussions with the FAA, because large-scale home acquisition is not part of the existing program would need to be amended. Once the program is amended, we'd have to update or recertify those noise contours every 5 years. We just did that in 2006. One issue is that the current FAA reauthorization, the funding the FAA gets from Congress, expires in October of this year. It's expected that some of the guidelines for funding noise programs will change. It's expected they'll become easier to use, or airports, more funds will be eligible, and so it's an important thing for us to monitor and track is when that FAA reauthorization comes online later this year. There are some issues, of course, with updating the program. One of the issues is that the FAA may stop our funding if we update our program of our existing program. They've done it at a couple other airports. What that would mean is that over time, it would take us some time to update the program and then to get back in line for funding. It could be several years before the program would begin again. One other issue that was identified is that if we change the program to include acquisition for this neighborhood, there may be some issues from folks in other areas that would want acquisition, but that was an issue that they raises a possibility. Next slide, please. A couple ways to look at this. Voluntary acquisition. These are the way the FAA structures home acquisition programs. Voluntary would be the area would stay residential, but the FAA would require us after we bought the home to sound insulate it and then resell it. So it's a fairly complicated process, and those are some of the numbers that I put together to show what that would involve. At acquisition at about $70,000 a home. The trailer homes that were identified One of the issues the FAA identified is that they would need a credit for the money that has already been spent on the existing homes, the 160, and then we have to sound insulate those homes to put them back on the market for about 67 to 70 million. Now, one of the issues with a voluntary acquisition is there aren't relocation benefits, and the relocation benefit is a payment made to the homeowner when they sell their house. That home value is compared with homes outside the airport area, and that difference is a payment made to the homeowner up to $22,000. It's not eligible with this. Next slide. The other approach is mandatory acquisition, which would be purchasing all of the properties and raising them and essentially changing the land use to commercial or industrial. Now, this would be a higher cost because it would include a relocation benefit, so the estimate is $100,000. You'd still have the trailer homes and the credit issue to deal with. So we're approximately the same value, $65 to $70 million under both scenarios. Next slide. I also looked at funding scenarios. Obviously, an important question is how much money would the FAA provide? Under one scenario, which I'm called full funding, is that they would provide funds for the existing program area. And let me see, next slide. The other is what I call partial FAA funding. That contour, the contours that you see there say 2006, that's what the FAA required us to do last year to update or certify our contours. The other scenario is partial FAA funding, where what they've done in the past is they take the contour line and move to the end of the block. Under this scenario, assuming this would be the current contour, that would take the program boundary to approximately 91st Street, which would include about 35% of the area. Those are kind of the two extremes as far as what the FAA funding scenarios could be. This shows again what the numbers are and the areas that would be involved in that funding scenario. Now, if we go through this analysis, voluntary acquisition, again, we're dealing with about $70 million. Full FAA funding, that would involve about $38 million. The rest of the funding would be made up with what's called passenger facility charges. It's a $3 charge on airline tickets. It's collected by the airlines and given to the airport and used for capital projects. And noise projects are eligible for PFC funds. The timelines then show that based on FAA participation, about $3 million a year, and then the TFC revenue at about $2.5 million, it would take up to 15 years using those two revenue sources. Next slide. This gets confusing because there's all these different scenarios, but this again would be the voluntary acquisition or partial FAA funding. What you see, though, of course, with the limited FAA funding, we'd have to use a lot of PFC revenue, and that, if you look at the bottom, extends our collection period out past 20 years. Next slide. Now we go to mandatory acquisition, and it runs through the same kind of scenarios and shows the funding timelines there. The next slide, please. And mandatory under partial FAA funding, again, limited FAA funds will require us to have a lot of PFC funds. Just a couple of items here on funding issues. The passenger facility charge. We would have to amend our passenger facility charge program. It would require a consultation with the airlines, which it would potentially be an issue, and I'm not sure they would support the effort, but I'll get to that in just a minute. And the other issue with the FAA funds, as I mentioned, is that we'd have to update our program every 5 years, which means they would be subject to review and changing FAA guidelines every 5 years. So that's a potential risk that we have. There is another option that I wanted to present as something to consider, and that would be what I'm calling adding a relocation benefit to our sales assistance program. But it would involve the use of local funds. That means specifically airport funds, not FAA or PFC, airport and or city funds. What it would do is it would take the existing sales assistance program that we have and add what's called a relocation benefit that I mentioned earlier. And it's something that I wanted to present, and it goes into some detail in this report about that option that would allow us to potentially help some of the homeowners. It's not a full buyout and a change in land use of the neighborhood. It's just another option I wanted to present. So in summary, we have about 550 homes and 161 mobile homes, about 65 to $80 million in cost, and about a 15 to 24-year time period to accomplish that. It would require an amendment to the existing program. The amendment process would take 1 to 2 years because it takes 6 months. The program has to be published in the Federal Register for 6 months. That's a big block of time. Then it takes several years to get back in line for the funding. PFC funds, we'd have to do an amendment for that also, and require airline consultation, and would have to be required to increase that PFC from $3 up to $4.50. Some of the issues with acquisition, one would be condemnation issues, especially if we went for mandatory acquisition, and resistance to the buyout. Next slide, please. Next steps. And again, there's much more detail in the report, but I wanted to get through these slides quickly. What I'm suggesting at this point is that, as I mentioned, the FAA funding cycle expires in October, and the new cycle begins in October of this year, after the Congress authorizes more funding. That I monitor that reauthorization because I mentioned the guidelines for FAA funds for noise programs will probably change to the benefit of the airports and the city in this situation. The next item, number 2, is since it would require a PFC amendment, that I begin informal discussions with the airlines about this project. And then next step 3 would be further develop this idea of a relocation benefit for the sales assistance program. So at this point, I provided some information, and certainly will be happy at any time to take questions now or later, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Mulder. I do appreciate it, and I appreciate everything you're doing to help us get this thing but it's still, as I contend, is that the city of Tulsa, we've been handicapped for so long, not having enough property to entice big companies to move in here. And that's an additional land that we've got sitting there that is more valuable to the airport and the city of Tulsa as empty lots than it is with these people living there. And hopefully we can figure a way to do this to alleviate that problem and get that property so that it can be sold and get some businesses, enterprise coming in here into the city of Tulsa. It was designed at one time, about 6 years ago. Trammell Crow was trying to buy all that property to put warehouses there. I don't know if we stopped that because people really wanted to see about trying to get bought up. I don't know, that we maybe should have let it go and then had another fighting problem with it. But actually, it's important that we all see where we are and still be on base and try to make something move and try to get something accomplished for the city of Tulsa, not for me and not necessarily the people of Layman Van Acres, but for all the citizens of Tulsa, because it's going to help all of us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councilor Turner, are there other cities that have used voluntary buyout programs for noise mitigation that has resulted in industrial parks close to the airport?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mulder. Thank you.
Item 11.